Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarland. I'm your host, Al McFarland. So instead of presenting you a live program today, I'm sharing with you one of my favorite episodes, a show that shows you how we've molded the show that you've come to know and love. And while you're enjoying this show, I'm going to be working with my team to make the program even more informative, more insightful, and even more inspiring. And if you haven't already, I'd like you to show your support for the conversation with Al McFarland by subscribing to the Insight News YouTube channel. This way you'll get alerted about and never miss new episodes, show clips, and special features only available on the Insight News channel. And you can find us on YouTube at Insight News MN. To make it easier, I've got a link in the description on this video. Well, thank you again for all your support this year. I can't wait for you to see all that we are preparing for 2023. Now, my friend, sit back and enjoy this conversation with Al McFarland. I'm Al McFarland. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarland. Today is Thursday, June 16th, 2022. And Thursdays, friends collect, gather, and have what we call unscripted conversations. And typically, the group includes 2 or 3 lawyers, and the group lawyers are not on board right now. And I know the one cannot join, another may be joining, but include my colleague and friend and co-worker, Brenda Lyle Gray, who is a columnist for my newspaper, Insight News, and she's also a book author and a former educator. Our group includes Ndugu Yusuf Mjini. I call him a master communicator, leader, elder, organizer, visionary, and a guy who's done innovative, phenomenal work in communications and in media. And another person that's regular is Angela Rose Myers. Angela is here. Hey, Angela. And Angela is like always a breath of fresh air, inspiration, illuminating, and bringing fire to whatever she wants to talk about. And I know she's got some fire to bring today about stuff she's doing that we're going to be all treated to and involved in. Also among our regulars is a brother, Jonathan Palmer. And Jonathan and I are both Morehouse men, both went to Morehouse. I'm not sure if you're part of that system. No, you're not. I know your bio doesn't say that, Troy. But Jonathan runs a neighborhood organization in St. Paul called the Hallie Q. Brown Community Center. And it's housed in a facility called the Martin Luther King Center. And it's a historic legacy, part of the settlement house movement. And based in St. Paul, great story, and it's doing great work. And Jonathan's a great guy. So let me start with that. And typically what we do is ask each of us what's on our mind. And let me do that first before I introduce you, Troy Johnson, because I really want you, a special guest here, to talk about what you do at the African American Literature Book Club, AALBC. And in my mind, one of the primary objectives today is to talk about books and about reading and about literacy and how we can both embrace and elevate our ability to value the acquisition, transfer, preservation, and creation of knowledge through the system of books and publishing. So, but first, Yusuf, what's on your mind, man?
Well, several things, Al. First, the January 6th committee is heating up. They are about to invite Clarence Thomas's wife, Virginia Thomas, to come in and testify about the multiple communication that she had with the president's chief of staff, with multiple legislators in Arizona, and whether the Justice Department will be asked to implement an indictment against the former president is a fact that remains to be seen. Also, Father's Day is coming up this weekend, as is Juneteenth, as is the 109th Freedom Fund anniversary dinner of the St. Paul NAACP on Saturday. Thank you for the wonderful interview that you did earlier in the week. Also, a framework has been agreed to, not the language for a bill, for moderate changes in the federal gun law, and we're hoping that there will be some movement on that in the next few days. And a song that has been playing all over the country around the clock is one by the Sounds of Blackness, a recent release called Juneteenth. So a lot happening, a lot to talk about.
Who's the doppelganger behind you?
That's my security.
Okay. Amazing. Brenda, what's on your mind?
Oh, my goodness. I had a question, and I don't know if it's been addressed or not. How are they mobilizing the Hispanic and LGBTQ population in voting registration? Hispanics are 47.5%. And
Of what?
of the population.
Really?
Yeah, it might be more than that. And I know it is in Arizona. And then the Native American population in New Mexico is, we have 19 pueblos and 4 reservations. I mean, I know the work that has to be done in the Black and BIPOC communities, but we've got to find votes. We have to have numbers, and I think the primaries are answering that question. I told Al, Idaho is now triple in population because they're all going to Idaho to prepare themselves for a cultural war.
Wow.
So they're taking up residency in states like North and South Dakota and Idaho. So there are a lot of things that we can ignore, but the more I don't have the volume up, but the more I listen to the hearings, the more I know that they are in preparation. And I don't know, Yusuf, if you got a chance to read Sean Lewis's emails on how Trump is building from the bottom up, and especially using voter people who are counting votes, are in the voting.
Certifying.
Yeah. And so that's who he's getting to, that and Secretary of States and school board members. That's how he's building.
He also raised $300 million ostensibly to wage lawsuits to stop the steal, and only a pittance of it has been used. So he's built up an incredible war chest that he can use for his own personal expense or whatever he chooses.
Well, and let me just add to that, Yusuf, because it was all under that, but then it was revealed that foundation never existed.
Correct.
So it was all clearly a grift, and they were going towards, the money went to the Trump hotels, money went to Mark Meadows, to Kimberly Guilfoyle. So it was clearly not even for fighting anything, but for lining pockets.
And the bulk of it still exists.
Jonathan, what else is on your mind? What else are you focusing on right now?
What I'm focusing on is we've got to do something drastic at this point. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at how much this is. I think more is being revealed now about the impact and the layering of systemic racism and how woven it is into our society than ever before. But the problems are the same ones we've been dealing with for 400 years. And so this is, how do we get people to wake up and understand and fully become engaged, and especially white people, because they have to be a part of this. They have to be engaged in this. This is this is an issue that started with them, and it's an issue that has to include them in order for it to actually be addressed. But we're heading very quickly to a culture war. We're heading very quickly towards conflict. You saw it start under Obama with the myth of they're going to take your guns so that they would stockpile guns. And it's going to be something really horrible if we don't do something drastic in terms of how we run this country, how we operate. And we need to rebuild the system.
And so when you say we, I often try to dissect which we you're talking about. Is it we in the Black community, the Africans, or the we BIPOC people of culture, or is it we progressives? Or I think you finally settled on we, the entire nation, is what I'm hearing you saying.
It is very much the entire nation. Black people and BIPOC people have already been there. We're already in the fight. We got to get the rest of us in the fight. But it's going to take the entire nation working towards this, because one of the easiest pop culture references is it's like the Matrix. If they're not unplugged, they're going to be part of the system that will go ahead and reinforce the system. So this is something we've got to get everybody woken and fighting for justice.
And fighting for our children.
Angela, go ahead. Make the first announcement of the event Monday, but then I'm going to have you come back and just go deep on that in a few minutes. But how you doing? And what else is on your mind? What all is on your mind?
Thank you. So as some folks know, I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And we have a virtual event coming up on Monday, June 20th. From 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. Central Time, where we will be discussing on a panel with State Senator Bobby Joe Champion, Attorney General Keith Ellison, Congressional Representative Ilhan Omar, and Minneapolis City Council Member Robin Wansley, the community violence that's happening in our community, historical drama, and the Juneteenth connection. So this panel will be called Taking Action, Violence, Historical Trauma, and the Juneteenth Connection. So it is in the spirit of self-emancipation, in the spirit of Black liberation, and also tangoing with these real issues in our community that's happening and how we as Black people are going to address them. And that is the Juneteenth connection. The fallacy of Juneteenth is that some white man emancipated us, when in actuality, as in the history of a lot of slave revolts and revolutions in America and in the Americas, we emancipated ourselves, right? And so getting to that point of freedom and Juneteenth is also the theme that we're talking about of self-emancipation, Black liberation, and how can we deal with these true issues in a way that is forward thinking, in a way that centers our humanity as a Black community.
You're changing the narrative altogether. Go ahead, Jonathan.
We don't get a skiwi?
Well, not today. You know, that is a trademark noise. Okay.
Gotcha.
So, I have to get approval if I'm going to do it on news, things like that. But maybe I will be moderating the discussion. So I'm very excited. So maybe you will hear it at the panel. So holding some things back, right?
There you go.
Brother Troy Johnson joins us for the first time. I called him a couple of days ago. I've been buying books from him and through his organization, and I'm glad to meet him, to know him. And I think you guys have noticed over the several weeks that I've been on I've told Brenda this, a book buying binge. And the book buying binge comes in part from, number one, the kinds of stimulating conversations we've been having. And as often as not, Youssef or Kamal would say, here's what I'm reading, and so that always challenged me to say, oh, here's what I'm reading. I hold up, something that I just got in or just got into. And so we've been doing that. And to me, that feels good. It feels appropriate. It's the right thing to do, to talk about that's what we do, is we read all the time. We're always in search of information, of clarity, of analysis, of competing points of view. And that kind of is a character trait that we each bring to each other every week, but I suggest it's a character trait of the culture. And if it isn't fully that, it can and should be, and that we have a duty and obligation to elevate that as one of the defining characteristics of our peoplehood, our personality as a culture and as a community. And then I told Brother Troy that I've been checking out this project. I'm wearing the shirt now of Nubia, and the project is called Narrative. It's narrative, the word narrative with the K. The K is silent, just like knowledge. Makes all the sense in the world to me. But Narrative and its counterpart, Nubia, are a social media experience created by Dr. Karen Hunter, the noted online journalist, award-winning journalist, and also Dr. Greg Carr, who is the head of the Africana Studies Department at Howard University. And they pulled together with some other companions, friends, an online digital experience that people are plugging into. Every Saturday morning, they have a project called In Class with Carr. They're at the 114th episode now, so 2 years plus. And 1,000, almost 2,000 people show up every Saturday just to listen and to engage in the conversation. And the intensity of that led to the creation of the companion project called Nubia, which is where they have more opportunities for us to engage around things we all can bring to each other. They say they're building something that we each can bring our bricks to, that we're all co-equal partners and developers of this innovation and this knowledge. So with that, I've been reading a lot, and I keep bringing it up every week, the work of Ikwe Arma, the Ghanaian novelist and essayist who talks about the principles of Ma'at, talks about how we can rediscover and reveal to ourselves an African way of knowing that recognizes and reconnects that which has been dismembered and that brings forth in an Osirian kind of way, a rebirth and continuity, a pathway to a future. But the future he talks about is not next week or next year, but it has us thinking about the next 1,000 years or next 2,000 years. And how do we get in our minds, in our spirits, this consciousness, this awareness, Angela, the centeredness of the words we use right now, and the value and the meaning of these words beyond the 20 feet or the digital distance we're in, but in the sense of history and a sense of timelessness. Well, all that is kind of what's exciting me right now, and that's why I was excited to call up Troy Johnson and to tell him thanks for what he's doing in creating the ALBC, African American Literature Book Club. He's the president of that. He started it in '77. Now it's the oldest and largest and most frequently visited website dedicated to books written by or about people of African descent. He's also launched several other internet businesses and websites, and he is an advocate for books and publishing and independent websites and Black culture. And with that, I want to just say, brother, I'm so pleased to meet you. Thank you for selling me the books that I bought from you. I want to buy more. I want to encourage everybody to go to your website and to buy all we can. I hope we can engender this idea that books are a form of currency, a form of value. And what if we all decided that one of the things that we'll do among the many is to create personal libraries that are expansive, that are specialized around our interest and our knowledge and our orientations, whatever they are. And that not only do we have these libraries for our own use and edification, but we use them as tools that we bequeath to either our community or to our children or our neighbors, but we use it as a currency, as a tool for wealth and a marker for wealth. So with that, Troy, go ahead.
The slaves used to say, capture knowledge, fly to freedom.
There we go.
And I think it's perfectly apropos for today.
Before we started live, Troy asked about Insight News and the spokesman and recorder, and Yusuf, I was going to ask you to just give him the background on our media landscape here in Minnesota.
Cecil Newman worked on the railroad, and he would talk to African American travelers who were going from city to city on whichever route he was on. He used to say, I walked all the way from Minneapolis to Seattle, because the porters and the folks who worked in the dining car were on their feet around the clock. And he purchased for $750 a Negro League team in Kansas City called the Kansas City Royals back in the day. He also published a magazine called Timely Digest. And on the cover of the first issue was a picture of who the feature article was about, none other than Paul Robeson. And Cecil Newman published the Minneapolis Spokesman, St. Paul Recorder, same newspaper, two different mastheads, now simply referred to as the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. For a number of years, it was the follow-up to other famous Black newspapers that were published here in the Twin Cities throughout the late 1800s and the early 1900s that were among national publications in terms of their import and their subscription base. So Cecil was a pioneer, and he was very respected, did a tremendous job of covering the African American community and issues that had impact in that community. And I think we've had 6 Black newspapers in that interim. We had the Spokesman Recorder, we had the Twin City Observer, St. Paul's Sun, we had Mary Kyle had the Twin Cities Courier. We of course have Insight, and we've had several other publications at different points in time. So there has always been, and I think it stems in part from the fact that in the 1950s, and Angela's father, Professor Sam Myers, who is the chairholder in the Roy Wilkins Center in the Humphrey Institute at the University of Minnesota, pointed out that in the 1950s, the city that had the area that had the highest Black literacy rate in the country was the Twin Cities. Also had the highest pay in relationship to white males who had the same job descriptions, had the highest home ownership, had the highest health statistics of Black people anywhere in the country. So this community was very well organized, very literate, very educated, very employable, and held its own in terms of the quality of life, which is why many people with a wink and a smile have referred to the Twin Cities as the land of milk and honey over the decades and the generations. But there's a lot of incredible history here, particularly within the African American community, going all the way back to the 1780s, when the first Black man, Jean Banga, was apprenticed to French fur trappers. And most people know his grandson, George Banga. The Black side of the family go by Bongo. The Native American side of the family go by Banga. And there's a Banga township up in Mille Lacs County that was named after George Bongo, because he was a trader, a trapper. You know, he had a trading post up in the Arrowhead region, which is the far northeastern tip of Minnesota on the Canadian border, and spoke 5 languages. So a lot of history here, a lot of history.
Joined by Dr. Irma McFarlane, one of our regulars as well. Irma, good to see you. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I'm going to go to our guest, Troy Johnson. We're setting him up and have you come in a little later on, but always good to see you. Troy, jump in, man. Just questions, comments, but talk about what your work, your vision, and priorities are.
Sure. It's what is most interesting to me is how I got started in this whole project, running AOBC.com. Back in 1997 and a couple of years before that, I was building websites for other small businesses. And this was at a time where the web just emerged. Prior to the World Wide Web, you all probably remember, or most of you who are on this call will remember systems like CompuServe and AOL, and they were great for allowing people to communicate and connect, but they owned the real estate. You could only do what they allowed you to do on those platforms. So when the World Wide Web emerged, the first thing I wanted to do, and many others like me, it was, open space. You can do whatever you wanted to do. And it was great. I mean, it truly was in a period where people could expand their reach for a very low cost and reach others. So I started building websites for other companies to help them do that, to expand their customer base. And one of my clients said that they liked their site, but they weren't making any money on it. So I decided to build a website to try to figure out how to make money on the web. And I chose books simply because at the time, Barnes & Noble, and this really predated Amazon, Barnes & Noble had an affiliate program that allowed me to post books, and I would send people of Barnes & Noble, and they would give me a commission on those book sales. But as soon as I set up the website, I started to discover a world that I was completely unfamiliar with. I was discovering authors and ideas and concepts, Black history, writers like John Henry Clark or Ivan Van Sertima, and people like, just on and on and on. And I became very passionate about what I was doing. And there were many others doing what I was doing, and they had platforms that I aspired to replicate or to, these were people who came in with knowledge. They weren't like me, someone who discovered Black books and indeed Black culture. And I grew up in Harlem, and there was just a lot that I didn't know. And so when I started to become exposed to authors and books who were writing in these areas, I was just overwhelmed. And I'm not just talking about nonfiction. I'm even talking about literary fiction. It just was overwhelming to me. And building the website, I learned about other websites, and I learned from those sites. So I come in from a tech background in the sense that I started with building websites. I didn't come from the knowledge of literature and books the way so many other great websites have. And this is the important part. The best websites didn't make it. The people who had the most knowledge, the most content, just simply didn't make it. And part of the reason had to do with things like SEO, and these are things that came later. So in the early days where the web really wasn't under the control of a handful of companies, it was a much richer environment. So as search engines spun up and became more dominant, like Google's search engine, they exerted a tremendous amount of control over the discoverability of websites. And Google made some serious mistakes. Most notably, and this may sound like a digression from what we were discussing, what we would talk about, but it's important, and I'll get to it why. So in 2011, Google implemented this algorithm called Panda. It's an update to their search algorithm to, purportedly to provide better search results for people on the web. But what they did was they actually hid great numbers of websites, including many, if not most, of the NMPA member websites. And I can bring up, if I can share my screen, I can show you a couple things to illustrate this. Is that possible? Can I do that?
Just go ahead and share. I think you can share.
All right, so I've never used this app before, so I'm gonna click share, and I'm going to
share a page or screen or a window. Yeah.
And I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share the entire screen, and I guess we just click share, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Am I sharing now?
Not yet. It takes a second. It takes a second. Here it is. Now I'll bring your screen in. There we go.
All right. So my screen is, it looks like it's going out into infinity. I don't know if you can see what my screen looks like.
You should maybe share to a tab or share to.
Let's do that then.
Yeah, I'm going to take it out again.
All right. So let me stop the share. Let's share to a
and
share screen.
Yeah. Are you using Chrome?
I am using Chrome here. Yeah. So we're going to do a window, and I'm going to go to, let's go to this. Let's go to this tab and share. Okay, this is a tab from my site. So let me go to a page that I'm interested in.
Okay.
All right. So, and I could probably share these links in the
chat.
In the chat. So here's one link as an example. Let me go back to this tab. You see a screen that has a lot of numbers on it and information. Okay, so this is a website called SEMrush, and what they do is they run a bazillion queries and against Google search engine, and they provide and based upon the results of those searches, they can pretty much get a good picture of a website's or domain's traffic. And they can look at the paid traffic and organic traffic. And right here, we're looking at my site's organic traffic. And I'm going to change this from 2 years to all time. And what you see here, where it's really next to the x-axis, this is a period of time where my traffic was buried. If we do something similar for Insight News, let me I have to go back and let me just type in the domain. Insight News is insightnews.com. News.com. And your domain is about as old as mine, actually.
Okay.
And so this is 2 years, but let's look at all time. And again, just buried. So what we don't see on this graph, and the reason we don't see this because it doesn't go back far enough, but if it went back to 2011, what you'll see is something that looks like this. And I apologize for having to go back and forth from screens, but what you'll see is something that looks like this. All right, so this is my traffic. It was just, really was just growing, and then it fell off a cliff. And it just got worse and worse. And it took 5 years for my traffic to recover. Many websites never, ever recovered. And this is because of an algorithm change that Google made. And this escaped any coverage in the media. Many webmasters that I knew personally who were affected by this just gave up. There was, they hopped through all of Google's hoops and wrote letters and did all kinds of things and just could not recover. The cause of this, as far as I can ascertain, had to do with, and I'm going to stop sharing, had to do with, as far as I believe, there was a writer named Cam Williams who used to syndicate articles across the web. And you're nodding your head, Al. I guess you've heard.
I knew Cam. Yeah. He died recently.
Yeah, he died a couple of years ago, and he was a great friend. But he would sell articles to different newspapers. Again, many NNMPA members. And he also sold them to this, what I would describe as a bad actor, someone who generated newspaper sites dynamically, someone that basically created, on the fly, like the Minnesota Examiner, the Dayton Inquirer, just bogus newspapers using, among other things, articles by Cam. So Google killed that website and every other website that used that content, and no repercussions. It killed my revenue for years. In terms of I served Google ads, and I was tooling around at a couple of grand a month, and it went down to several $100 a month. And for a lot of websites, losing that kind of traffic for that longer period of time was just devastating. The reason that's important is because the very sites that I could learn from, the very sites that shared information about important topics, important books, were just clobbered, overnight. And again, during that time, what then tended to happen is a lot of the traffic started to move towards social media. And all the problems that we have with social media in terms of using algorithms and artificial intelligence to manipulate people to do certain things. So we went from a period in the late 90s where it was a tremendous era to a period today where where the web is really under the control of a handful of companies. I've written a lot about this over the years, and Google search engine, for example, went from just sharing search results to being a place where they monetize the search engine results page. So in the old days, when you would do a search for an author's name, you might get websites that did really deep research and articles and interviews about authors and books and topics. And today you get Google's bookstore, you get Google front-running search results with information they've copied from Wikipedia right on the search engine results page. And then, of course, you have ads that dominate everything.
Something went wrong. Try again in a few seconds.
And you also have Google's own bookstore dominating search results. So as a result, sites are losing traffic just organically because they're unable to compete with Google's own search engine and with the advertisers who can afford to advertise against popular search terms. So we're really in a period where it's always been like the wild west on the World Wide Web, but it's becoming critical in the sense that sites like mine are around because I've been doing this 25 years, and I have some modicum of skill with search engine optimization, despite Google's mistakes. But the people who have the most knowledge aren't the ones who also come with that kind of technical expertise. And so we went from a period where almost anybody could create a website to a period where the technology has made it so much easier, but it's almost impossible to get seen. And that's our biggest challenge. So circling back to what you were saying, Al, mm-hmm. We have to support sites like an ALBC. We have to support independent Black-owned newspapers, and we do that by purchasing products, visiting the site, commenting on where engaging on the platforms. Because if we only engage on Facebook's or Meta's websites or Twitter only, we do that. And the consequences, other sites, other independent sites fail. So it's so I subscribe to a couple of Black-owned newspapers, magazines. I actually do buy books from other Black-owned sites. I actively support other independent bookstores. If you do a search on Black-owned bookstores, my site will come up. If you do a search on the top Black-owned websites, I'll probably will be number one in that search result. I promote Black-owned newspapers, magazines, because I realize how important those platforms are. Today we live in a world where many of us, rely on social media for our news. And if you rely on social media for your news, you are just simply being lied to, if not outright manipulated. And again, there's been many things written about that. But what hasn't been covered is, how Black sites have been completely marginalized. I mean, and it's, many of us don't know what we don't know, because, if you haven't discovered the sites or know what was lost, there's, you can't appreciate what's lost. So I've been on the web actively since it's been invented or made commercially available. And it's sad to see what's happened over the last 20 years. So
How do you make money now? Do you sell? I buy books from you, right?
Right.
And so explain the commercial operation that you have going on, number one. And then two, what's the fix? I hear you ringing the bell, sounding the alarm, and I'm so glad that you are. But I don't want to let you leave without telling us what we need to do so that we preserve and protect and grow our interests and opportunities and reshape the future into one that we can win in.
Yeah, you're doing it already. I mean, you out the gate, you started talking about Nubia and knowledge, and I actually wasn't aware of those properties until you mentioned them to me. And I'm on the web, so that tells you something. And so by doing that, by purchasing books from my website. So to answer your first question, ALBC makes money through book sales. So you buy a book and I earn profit from that book sale. Mm-hmm. That's not the primary revenue stream. The primary revenue stream is advertising. The reality is Amazon sells more books than all other online booksellers combined. And I understand that most people who come to my website or discover a book on the site will go to Amazon and buy it. It's hard to fight against Amazon and sell books. And, that's another one of the things that has happened on the web. Amazon can afford to sell a book, 60% off. If it's a really popular book, like Michelle Obama's Becoming or Ibrahim Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, they can sell a book well under what my discount rate is. So I can't compete with that. So, but what people can do is appreciate that if you do discover a book on NALBC or any of the remaining online booksellers, you should purchase it there. Because again, we're one of the few platforms, for example, reviewing books. We're reviewing books by independent authors. So if, and one can argue, we don't need more reviews. But I think that would be a silly argument. I think we need more reviews. Yep. There are so many books out there that people just aren't aware of. And to have them covered in a critical fashion is really important. So, independent newspapers did that. Cam's articles, as an example, did that. He reviewed books and, published them in newspapers across the country. And, Google penalized websites, that publish them online for the reasons I described. But yeah, you have to support the sites. So ALBC makes money through ad sales on the website and through our newsletter. So when you visit the website, you help generate revenue for the website.
Troy?
So, yes.
Yusuf here. One of the challenges for Black writers and authors is finding a publisher who will market their work and who won't edit their material to the point where it's hard to recognize it. Are you seeing any inroads? And because we had Third World Press, we had Black Books Bulletin, there have been some outlets, but few and far between. Are you seeing any inroads in terms of access to publishing opportunities for Black authors?
Yeah, I mean, the digital revolution has made it possible for literally anyone to publish a book.
Self-publishing?
Yeah,
yes.
self-publishing.
So there's a hybrid model now that's out. I'm actually putting my column together to which Al wrote the intro. Archway Publishing used to be part of a platform called Authors Publishing. Simon and Schuster, after the big black explosion, realized that they were missing out because the big publishers won't look at you unless you have an agent, right?
Mhm.
And so they decided they partnered with Authors Publishing and created Archway Publishing. It is, you buy a packet just as you would do for any self-publishing, but you get the expertise of them and Simon and Schuster. You own everything, but if Simon and Schuster decides that they are interested, then you can go into their market. So it's a way for them to kind of scan and see what's out there. One of my photographs was used on a book that was by, I think it's, I want to say Iron, the publisher that did The Three Mothers, which is on the mothers of Malcolm, Baldwin, and MLK. And the name will come to me. But they also have hired someone to start looking at authors of color who are not coming through agents. So there's a new thing that's happening out there, and that may be sort of a way for folks to get noticed.
There also is, community publishers. So the ones that I'm thinking about particularly is Strive, and that is a Minnesota-based publisher, Strive Community Publishing.
There's
And
also Black Ink, which is located right behind Golden Time Coffee Shop.
exactly. And I would say if there is a book that you are reading, that you are excited by, that you believe is part of your voice or what you would like to write, look into the publisher. Not really the Toni Morrisons, but these smaller books that are books that you really are enjoying. Look into these publishers because you never know. Publishers are always looking. And then do your own thorough check. Right. This is something that our community always kind of falls into. We have a goal and we don't care who we lie in bed with to get that goal accomplished, but that matters. And I was just so incredibly happy to see on the AALBC website one of my favorite new books, Blend In or Fade Out by Colinaise Hendon, and a review for that book. And that is a biracial woman who grew up in Minnesota and her story, her memoir. And funny enough, I originally bought that book at the new coffee shop that is in George Floyd Square because her son has opened up what is it called? For Real Coffee in George Floyd Square. And her son was selling that book at his coffee shop. I read it, and the moment I opened up AALBC website, that was part of on the advertisement side, one of the books they recommended, and that was put out by Strive Community Publishing. So, that is just like a wonderful story. And that also goes to show the relevance of, putting your own words out there, your own memoirs. You never know who's reading. I'm not biracial, but reading about this woman's experience being biracial, light-skinned Black woman, and she went to Breck, and there's a whole chapter about Breck in there. Breck School is a private school here, and I went to Breck. So, it's very, very pivotal for me to read that book. So you never know who might be moved by your words, and just don't go letting your intellectual property be owned by anybody. Really look into who's publishing your work.
Perfect.
Colinaise was a student of mine at the Urban Journalism Workshop at the University of Minnesota when she was maybe 16 years old. So we go back. I was so pleased to see her book featured on your website as well.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, right, is take everything that was just said regarding that book, make a YouTube video of it, and put that underneath the book and use that as a way to help promote that book. Because you've described that book in a very compelling way, and that's the thing that's missing. And that's what we need. And Amazon, despite their power, can't do that. I mean, they're just not going to they can, but they're not going to throw the resources at doing that. They want the us to put our stuff on their site and, further enrich them. And that's one of the things that we've been doing, is just continuing to enrich the wealthiest platforms on the web. And they're the ones that don't serve us as well.
Troy,
There's a key legislation about this that is right now in the House. So there was last week, tonight with John Oliver this week, covered this whole piece about Amazon and about Google. And there are two pieces of legislation: the American Choice and Innovation Act and the Open App Markets Act. One of the things that they have found is that Amazon, Google, and I think it was Apple, and there was one other I can't think of, but they have come under investigation for the fact that they rank and favor their own products and services. So the reason why you don't see the books that are coming and you don't see Troy's site is because they are going ahead and their algorithm puts the Google searches that go back to Google products or Google affiliates, and the Amazon searches that go back to Amazon's up as the first rank, and they get pushed down to the second or third page, which effectively kills them. So this legislation is looking to break up the monopolies that are dominated by Google, by Amazon, and make it so that they can't rank their own products, so that they have to provide, fair market competition for groups like Troy's and others.
Troy, 10 books you recommend. What should we be reading now? What should everybody have in their library? All right. I would direct you, because I can't say them off the top of my head, but I would direct you to my most recent bestsellers list. If you go to our website and you click books, you'll see a list of the most recent bestsellers, and you will see them broken up by fiction, nonfiction, children's books, and poetry. Right now, looking at the bestsellers list, there's been a surge of interest in urban fiction, led by The Streets Have No King by Jaquavis Coleman. Lady Hubbard, The Last Suspicious Holdout, is really popular. A book by April Sinclair that just became unavailable for sale. The Same Fool Ain't Gonna Be the Same Fool Twice. Interesting thing about the site is a lot of the titles that sell aren't the front list titles. Some of these titles go back, 10, in some cases 20 years. So that's another thing that's important. Sites like AOBC keep older titles to the fore. John Edgar Wideman's most recent book of short stories, Look for Me and I'll Be Gone, is in the top, one of the top selling books. On the nonfiction side, we have the 1619 Project that's been selling like crazy. Cast is still doing well, by Isabel Wilkerson. Another surprise favorite, a surprise favorite to me, is a book called You Grow Girl. It's a book by Christopher Griffin, and it's just someone very flamboyant, teaching people how to grow plants. And it's been, everybody I show this book to loves it, and they love it because of the advice that's given about plants. But it's got a really interesting cover. Life is God's Best Gift by Sam Keeg, mispronouncing the name. That's a very popular book. Love and Justice by Laisha Kai, performance artist. Black Food, Bryant Terry, and it goes on and on. So I've been publishing bestsellers lists going back to 1998.
Troy?
Go ahead.
Yusuf again. What about the resurgence of writers from earlier generations, like Richard Wright, like Zora Neale Hurston, like competing when Harry Belafonte, James Baldwin, and Lorraine Hansberry met with Bobby Kennedy, because Jack Kennedy was afraid to meet with them to talk about issues of concern in the Negro community. Are you seeing some continuation of you talked about John Henrik Clarke, there's Joseph Benjo Cannon, you mentioned Ivan Van Sertima, particularly as it relates to history. It's almost like an Easter egg hunt to go and find accurate information about African American and African history.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before you answer that, I want to make sure that I get Angela back in too. So finish that concept, and Angela, jump in because I want you to talk about the project coming up Monday before we close. Okay. Go ahead, Troy.
Oh, okay. What you said. You mentioned the knowledge website and what they're doing on Saturdays. People like Greg Carr. I heard
narrative. It's called.
Yeah, narrative. Okay, and I first was exposed to Greg Carr during a Zoom conference we did on Marcus Garvey, and he just blew me away in terms of how he spoke. But again, this is, I was not familiar with Greg Carr prior to that Zoom conference, so I'm not surprised that he's doing well with this thing. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Ndugu. I thought you was prepping to let Angela speak, but
the resurgence of the works of earlier Black authors.
Yeah. So for people like me, that resurgence is ongoing. There are many people coming in and of all ages and discovering these writers, both contemporary ones like Greg and Anthony Browder, and some of the historians going back a few generations. So people are discovering these authors as if they are just as if they just came around. And the important thing is publishers like Black Classic Press out of Baltimore, who keep important but obscure books in print. And so they keep people like Tony Martin, who was the great researcher for Garvey. All of his books are in print. They just recently obtained the rights to all of Carter G. Woodson's books. So they republished everything that Carter G. Woodson published. And, those books in the public domain, and you go on Amazon and everybody and their mother is republishing those books. But the treatment that Black Classic Press gives to those titles is what, puts them a cut above. And they also have a direct relationship with the Sala, Woodson's own organization. So it's important that we support these organizations, not just for these specific projects, but the others that they're doing that need to be more widely known. So, to answer Al's question earlier, visit the sites, patronize the sites, spread the word about the sites. This platform now that you've given me to talk about ALBC, and I've droned on about some kind of wonky technical stuff, but that kind of stuff is really important because we have to, if we rely on search for us to be discoverable, you can forget about it. As you said, or I think Jonathan mentioned, if once you're on the second or third page, you're undiscoverable. Nobody and increasingly the way Google works, you don't even have to leave the search engine results page often to find what you need, because Google is scraping Wikipedia, and then Wikipedia wants people to write for free, and they're being monetized by Google. It makes no sense. So we have to support our own.
It makes perfect sense from Google's point of view.
Right.
It's brilliant. Yeah. And Amazon is brilliant too. They execute incredibly.
And so the question is, how do we discover and execute our own brilliance? That's the question. But let me leave it there and bring Angela in. Angela, I want to make sure you had more time to talk about your project, and you can connect these things, because I think you are always focusing on the expanse of our energy.
Yes. So this upcoming panel on June 20th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. is that the Delta Phi ladies from Delta Phi Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. The panel is called Taking Action, Violence, Historical Trauma, and the Juneteenth Connection. We will be talking with a state legislator, policymakers, from Ilhan Omar to our city councilwoman, Minneapolis city councilwoman, Robin Wansley, Bobby Joe Champion, and Keith Ellison. So, this conversation comes out of a sorority, a historical Black sorority. And I think for some folks who might not be familiar with the history of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, they might be surprised, right, to find that we as Black women are putting together this panel to have this conversation. But this is actually within the long legacy of Black sororities and Alpha Kappa Alpha doing conversations like this. So for those who don't know, Toni Morrison is an AKA, Maya Angelou is AKA, you know, there's a long history of AKAs. Myself, Nakima Levy Armstrong are AKAs, you know, of Black women having these conversations and being in the civil rights or social justice movements. So even like within the history of my own organization, we have had women who helped with the foundations of the UN, right, of addressing issues within the Black community and being front runners, leaders like Coretta Scott King in the civil rights movement. So we are again in our continuance of Black history, of Black women's history, taking it upon ourselves to have this crucial conversation about the violence in our communities, about historical trauma in our communities, and also how we will fix and how we will come together to find solutions, policy solutions. And this, you know, we're trying to kind of find a grounding in what is the policy, what is the legislation that these representatives are doing. But we are continuing to have this strong conversation in our communities and leading this conversation as to what we must do as Black folk to liberate ourselves. And that's the Juneteenth connection, is the self-emancipation, the self-liberation of our community and addressing these hard, tough issues. We are not here just to look cute, right? I'm not an AKA just because I was cute, okay? I'm an AKA because I had the grades and I had the dedication to my community. And that is why I joined this organization whose ethos is service to all mankind, not service to look cute. And so that is what, you know, we are here to do into addressing these hard issues in our community.
And mention your vice president, Kamala, is AKA.
Yes. Kamala Harris is also an AKA. She's a Howard AKA too. So, I mean, I'll put it out there. There's a lot of other Black Greek organizations who are doing amazing things. But today and about this panel, and from my standpoint, I'm just pointing out the AKAs. But again, yes.
Irma, let me have you kind of close this conversation out. I so appreciate the fact that your mission includes archiving. You are on a mission that's global to encourage Black women and Black people to be archivists actively. And you've created some institutions to both execute the idea, but to also provide a model for others to do the same. And it seems to me that your study, your work as an anthropologist, and your leadership as an educator, a university president, as a researcher, bridges this entire conversation, because you speak from within the culture, about culture, but you also speak with the knowledge of antiquity and the knowledge of the power of narrative creation.
Yes.
And the propensity of our people to be regenerative and to move forward into a future that we control, that we bring agency to. So why don't you just reflect on what we said this morning so far? And we'll close.
Well, this is, you know, all of this is a nice sort of jumping point for me to highlight a couple of things. One is you asked the question about some of the older authors, and I'm happy to say that one of my photographs is going to grace the back cover of Penguin's re-release of Toni Cade Bambara's The Salt Eaters. It should be coming out, and my photograph from my archive is on the back of that. I got great photos of Toni Cade Bambara when she came to Amherst, Mass. And there are about 397 of my photos that have been digitized, black and white. There are about 50 of Baldwin. I have about a whole roll of Sonia Sanchez, Chinua Achebe. So that archive, that's another piece. I'm a writer, but I'm also a photographer. And then I am actually going to be flying to Boston on June 20th. A couple of days, I'm going to be meeting with UMass Amherst to talk about the archive and funding and who we're bringing into that. And I was in touch when I was in Paris with Miriam Harris, whose grandmother was one of the 1940 human computers at NASA. And she wants to put that material in my archive. And the other piece that I'm going to be doing in Boston is filming with filmmakers who did the American Masters, Lorraine Hansberry. Well, they're making a film, a documentary on Zora Neale Hurston as an anthropologist. And guess whose work has been really pivotal in that? So I'm very excited about that because that's something I've been working on, is framing Zora not just as a literary figure, but as an anthropologist. And I finally get a chance to talk about it.
The Barnard archives have some information on Zora Neale Hurston. She was a Zeta.
Yes.
And also some of the Schomburg has a lot. The Schomburg is such a fantastic historical site if you're ever in Harlem. So I went to Barnard.
I've been to the Schomburg, and the two largest collections on Zora are, I actually have a piece called Finding Zora, where I talk about being a detective. The Beinecke Library at Yale has one of the larger collections, and that's where the original manuscript of Their Eyes Are Watching God is. Carl Van Vechten invited Zora and invited Langston Hughes to contribute their papers there. And so a lot of correspondence that she sent to Langston is there. And then, of course, the Spingarn at Howard University, but also the University of Florida. Zora died in Fort Pierce, Florida, and she died penniless. And one of the things they used to do was to burn poor people's stuff. And a Black deputy sheriff remembered that she was somebody and literally snatched materials out of the fire and preserved them and then turned them over to the University of Florida. So I haven't been to the Barnard archives. I do plan to get to Rollins. I do want to do that because now I'm pulling together all the work that I've been doing on Zora for the last 2 decades as an anthropologist. It's called Lifting Zora Neale Hurston from the Shadows of Anthropology.
And while we're talking about archives, the Hallie Q. Brown Community Archive chronicles the history of the Rondo community and Hallie Q. Brown. And we have a Black woman archivist trained. They make up only about 3% of the field. So
Black archivists in general make up less than 4%. Black women are even rarer. Yes. Please send me her contact because I plan to be visiting Minneapolis this summer to see family.
Here's a book on the Black Press by the Howard University Press called The History of the Black Press.
They did that. Okay.
So check it out. And then anybody else, Angela, what you reading?
Yes, I have the book here, Blend In or Fade Out by local author Colonies Hendon. And then I also have Sparked, which is about the uprising, George Floyd uprising, and issues there. And the beginning of section 2 is the Minnesota Paradox by my father, Samuel L. Myers. So those are 2 Sparked. Awesome. And Blend In or Fade Out, which I thought was very apt for Minnesota.
Yusef, what you got, man? Yusef, what you got? 1619. You're muted. Yusef. You're muted.
Sorry about that. 1619 project.
Okay. Jonathan, Brenda?
Black Gun, Silver Star. It is the story of Bass Reeves, who is the inspiration for the Lone Ranger.
Wow. Okay, Brenda, what you got?
Oh, I'm writing.
She's doing it, right?
Well, I have to.
Has me reading so much. It's like reading books every time he sends something. So I'm writing.
I have 2 historical references that are really good too. Arnig, which is by Harriet Wilson, sketches of Black life. That was a very good book, very old one of the first novels written by Black women in the U.S.
Yeah, mine's pretty beaten up.
And then also Running 1,000 Miles to Freedom, which tells the story of two escaped enslaved folks who self-emancipated. The woman was very fair, so she disguised herself as an ill white man, and her husband disguised himself as the, dutiful, enslaved man. And they went from the southern parts of the U.S. to Boston, and from Boston they found that even that right when the Slave Act passed, where you could capture slaves and return them, they left the U.S. to go to Nova Scotia, and then even there they found a lot of racism and oppression. So then they went to Europe, and actually that story of once they've self-emancipated is just as interesting, that second part of the story. So those are two historical documents.
William Craft and Ellen Craft.
Yes, William and Ellen Craft, and those two stories, Arnig and Running 1,000 Miles to Freedom, are both very great historical documents and stories to read.
Yeah, I did an article on that. You remember that one? Yeah.
Irma, anything you want to recommend to people?
Well, I've got 3 books that I hope to get to. One is called Surfacing, that I bought back from South Africa. It's on being Black and feminist in South Africa, decolonization and Afrofeminism, and then also Female Fear Factory. And so my hope
hold the
is
covers up. Hold the covers in the camera.
Oops, sorry.
Okay.
So this one, decolonization and Afro. Oops.
There
we go. And then finally Surfacing. And what I'd like to do is, make this my reading for the summer and do some kind of joint review of the books.
Awesome. Jonathan, did you share something already? I can't remember now. Time's going so fast.
He did.
I talked about this, which is
that's right.
Black
Gun Silver Star.
So let me close it with Troy. Troy, final words are yours.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we are publishing a new novel from the critically acclaimed writer Kalisha Buchanan called Running to Fall. It's a follow-up to a last novel. This will be out in the fall. You mentioned earlier things that we can do is that we can publish our own work, and the technology makes it so, but we have to work collectively in order to uplift all of the good stuff that we're doing. And so that's what I will end with that statement.
At some time, Troy, I'd like if you get a chance to study the work of Per Ankh Publishing, and that's the project that Aikwe Arma has created in Senegal. I'd love to examine how that works and see if there are models that are like it. There must be here, but how can we elevate this capacity that we can have among ourselves to self-publish and to do the business?
Yeah, so I need, if you have a contact with them, I can't find the books in distribution locally. Okay. I haven't checked all my sources.
Okay.
But that's the main reason they're not up on the site yet, because I would have added them immediately when you told me about those books. Okay. So I did go to the website. I may follow up directly with the person on the website, but I just need a way to secure the books. And I have there's a distributor, Africa World Press, Red Sea Press, that those books will be perfect for them to distribute domestically if they aren't already.
And so, Al, maybe one of the things that Insight News can do is to have some kind of place where you just have where the Black publishing sources, that people would be able to see where all these particular sites are, Black publishers, Black, on-site websites, because that's the kind of thing that can be tweeted and handed around to, people who are teaching and things like that. So that would be great as a resource.
Troy has created those lists. So Troy, I can get them, publish them, and share them through our websites and platforms as well.
Yeah, to put the newspapers in there, I can put the bookstores and book websites. And there's, I know I'm missing a few because.
Now, do you have a Twitter?
I'm on social media everywhere at AALBC. So my Twitter will be AALBC.
Gotcha. Okay, we'll be tweeting about it.
Thank you all so much. What a wonderful conversation, and have everyone have a good week. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for
Stay
inviting me.
safe.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks.